Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tim Unscripted. And this is an AI focused episode. So let's get into this. What you're seeing here is a brand new space on the internet. It is brought to you by a company that you may not have heard of, Thinking Machines. A little bit of background on Thinking Machines. Thinking Machines is a company that was established by an Anthropic alum. I'll let you do your own research. They recently released their first model on their own platform called Tinker. And that model is named Inkling. So what makes this unique is that this is, in a sense, a research lab that has been founded by people who were very instrumental in some of the early public-facing large language models and have now put their own open source large language model out into the market. And Inkling is really impressive. I'm not going to go into all the details on this. I will say this, I have already used it, and the response that I got from that experience prompted me, no pun intended, to record this video. And one of the things that I like to point out is that I am an advocate of open source. And I say that from the standpoint of, I believe that we should have, and I'm not saying should to shame anybody as much as I'm saying should, as in we should strive. I would like for us to strive to balance commercially purchasable software in addition to community built software, because there is really an opportunity to balance the dynamic in this particular space. And I'm saying that as a person who really earns a living by working on commercially produced software by companies and by organizations. This is how I, take care of my family. So don't get me wrong. I'm not pushing everything into open source. I am advocating for a balance in the way that we approach things. So that being said, I am quite surprised because this is really the first US-based company that has gone this route, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, outside of some of the more bespoke labs that use foundational models, not frontier models, but foundational models, and then performance train them. It is my understanding that this is really Thinking Machines' first foray into a custom-built, custom-trained model. And if you look at the way that this is set up, it appears to be that way. So if you've got any background on this, feel free to drop that into the comments, give better context. But what really impressed me about this is that, this is bringing the best, in my opinion, of commercial frontier models to people who are looking to see what open source is capable of outside of the normal subscription environment. And I'm saying that because there's a lot of ways to access open source models, this being one of many. I, of course, encourage people to go out and do their own research. Olama also is now an open source model platform that is hosting and allowing you to have access to many of the models that they host, in addition to having a chat, a user interface available to you. So now that you've got a bit of background and you understand that my advocacy is balanced, that there's dynamic tension here, that we live in this polarity where this can be valuable and this can be valuable at the same time. Let's get into this in particular. So what I've done here is I've loaded Tinker up and I am using Inkling as my model. And I wanted to highlight a framework that I have only recently become aware of. And I'm going to give the folks at Bordy AI credit for this, because I was on a call earlier this week, and it was specifically between Bordy, in addition to Andrew D'Souza, the CEO of Bordy AI, and the author of this framework, Geoff Woods, Geoff Woods. And it really comes from his book. And I went, let me try this. And so subsequently, what I decided to do is I put CRIT, which is context, role, interview and task to work for me. And so subsequently, what this is boiling down to is I already did this specific prompt, so I know from my perspective what this outcome looks like. I want you to start qualifying your model use using a framework like this. I think it's very insightful because it extends the capability of the model in a direction that we don't normally think about. And I'm going to be introducing some other frameworks in my Tim Unscripted series because I think they are definitely useful. And for leaders in particular, having a framework like CRIT or RTCC, which is role, task, context, and the second C escapes me. I posted about this on LinkedIn. You could go to LinkedIn. I know it's actually in one of my pinned posts at the top of my page. And by the way, I am on LinkedIn /Tim Dickey. So you can go there, and I do stay active on social media. With that said, I also have properties. I have my personal blog, timdickey.com. In addition to, I've recently launched the Great Invert, which is really designed to help equip individuals who are working on product teams, but more broadly, individuals who are looking for AI resources and approaches, because I'm a firm believer that this technology has the potential of making our lives better. There's always going to be trade-offs. Again, there's polarity around all of this, and I am not pro AI. I'm not negative AI. I am an AI realist. And that plays into the second point I want to make. And I'm making this actually with the Olares One, which is my personal AI appliance backed by the BEC lab and the team at Olares. And I wanted to show you that on my own personal hardware, locally hosted AI, using a Laguna model. And by the way, this has long context. I believe it's a 1,000,000 token window, if I'm not mistaken. I did the same thing. And it's the CRIT framework, same prompt, and it's walking me through the questions for the interview. Now, I can't tell you specifically if it's gone out and looked at all of my sites, whether that be LinkedIn, as my social site, YouTube, which is probably where you're watching this video, or the Great Invert, or timdickey.com. But I do know that it's queued up and it's ready to ask me questions. So, Tim, why are you saying all of this? I'm saying all of this because I think our future is hybrid. And I'm saying I think because I am in the process of testing this hypothesis. I think we are in a state where we have very capable open source. Now, mind you, these two terms are different. Open source being licensed under a particular type of license, usually MIT license for public consumption, but not for resale. Open weight, meaning that you have the opportunity to performance tune the model on your own hardware to kind of specifically focus on the things that you want it to do. So these open models versus these proprietary or closed models, the likes of which Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, and the list goes on. The hybrid future looks a lot like doing certain repetitive tasks more than likely on your own hardware with open source, potentially open source and open weight models, versus some of the heavier lifting, the compute intensive work on a subscription service. So I am not advocating that you just ditch your Claude or your ChatGPT or your Gemini subscriptions. What I'm saying here, because I am consistently doing a lot of research and writing and whatnot using my favorite tool, Perplexity, which is right here. And of course, I've got Jeff Wood's CRIT framework as an example of the type of research that I'm doing. I even do some compute work with my subscription. This hybrid approach allows us to have the best of both worlds. One of my bigger concerns, and it goes back to the situation a few weeks ago with the launch of Fable and Anthropic subsequently being told within days, you need to shut this down by the United States government. What happens when we lose access and we have really streamlined our work and made our work more efficient as a result of being so dependent on subscription-based models, on proprietary frontier vendor provided subscription access. Where do we go? I'm a big believer in balancing a degree of, smart business focused feed an ecosystem through subscriptions and fees and purchase price versus, hey, you know what? You can lower your overall cost of doing things by purchasing a piece of hardware. Now, mind you, you're going to be limited to a certain extent, but that allows you a lot of time to figure out what's going to work for you and get your working arrangement, your working agreement settled for the purposes of making yourself more efficient, both personally and professionally. And you're doing it with this upfront investment. And think about it this way. If you're in business, think about it as a difference between capital expense versus operations expense. I look at those subscriptions as being OpEx. They don't have an end versus buying your own hardware and having the ability to host your own models. That's a CapEx expense. And by every indicator, we're at a point this video, of course, is being recorded mid-year 2026. We're at a point where hardware costs are going to continue to go up for this foreseeable future. It doesn't mean that they're going to continue to go up forever and ever, but at least for right now, for what people are able to forecast because of the demand of certain types of chips and capability that large companies are asking of these manufacturers. So one of the things that I'm doing to mitigate some of my risk is I've got investments. So I've got a production workstation, which is the one that I record on. I've got a Mac Studio Pro. I've also got the Olares One. I've got a Linux-based laptop by System 76. I've got a bunch of different hardware in my home lab that I use to figure things out for myself and then come online, make videos and suggestions based on what I'm actually learning. So let's do this. What I wanted to do, and I don't think I've done this holistically, is kind of walk you through the Olares marketplace, because it's really great from the standpoint of showing you what's already in an appliance like this. Now, the neat thing is that this is all open source software. So there's communities of developers who are working very hard to build software that everybody can benefit from. And a lot of this you can download from public repositories on hosting sites like GitHub and run it for yourself. So you don't need an Olares to do this, or even the Olares operating system to do this. It's a good way to kind of get your hands dirty in some of this and gain an understanding of the art and the engineering behind software development, because you get to see the code itself in these repositories. I deeply appreciated that. It has actually helped me become more empathetic and emotionally intelligent and aware of some of the challenges and struggles that software developers, software engineers face on a day-to-day basis. So I'm just walking you through some of the things that are already in the Olares marketplace. And the neatest thing that I have to point out here is that if you've got an application and you want to run it in a Docker container, and of course it's something that you've built, or it's an open source application that you found that you're really interested in, the Olares One actually provides you the tools to be able to build the infrastructure around that and deploy it on the appliance, or also on their operating system, which you can download and install on your own hardware. Very flexible. And this is the reason why I'm saying that a hybrid approach is probably the direction that most of us you may want to consider going, because for as much as I love the idea of having this huge, very performant model running on the web, what I'm very hesitant to do is commit everything to a model like this or any one of the big players, knowing that an outage can occur. And it could be days, if not weeks, before I get access to my subscription again. So this is balancing risk in my mind. This is me going, hey, there's a give and take in all of this. And again, it's an economic decision. Not everybody can do this, but this is one of those things that I advocating for, because I think it's a good way to put some of the simpler, lower risk, easier things that we don't need to be focusing on as human beings in the right place by doing things on our own hardware. And then leveling up for more strategic things like this to the subscriptions. It's not going to, honestly, I don't think anybody is going to immediately abandon a subscription. Now, economics may play into all of this, which at this point in time, people are making tough choices, myself included. Where am I going to spend money? Where am I going to invest money for the future in my professional space as a product development person? I am taking this approach. I would ask that you do your own homework, do some research, figure out what might work best for you, and do the due diligence. Because at the end of the day, this is not about a one-size-fits-all solution. This is about figuring out what's going to work for you currently and probably going forward into the future for the next few years. And I can't tell you what that time horizon, maybe 3 to 5 years, who knows? But this is one of those things where I look at my upfront investment, especially on the Olares One, and what I've already done with it. And I'm like, this was a good choice for me. So you wrapped up another episode of Tim Unscripted. So this is kind of a new avenue or a new angle on my focus to bring more tech into the conversations that I record and post, but specifically around how, as a leader, I am making strategic choices to do things differently in the technology that I'm using on a day-to-day and in my professional capacity, personally and professionally. And I'm just giving you options and showing you what's out there and in the market today that might help you. So take care. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And you've just wrapped up another installment of Tim Unscripted.